I think the best way for me to do this is I have my 2024 or 2014 player's handbook here, so I'm just gonna kind of use this as like my guide to teach you how to do this. My goal is to get you. We're not gonna super worry about character building today.
Yeah,
I am gonna have you probably just like make sure if you have any questions, like feel free to ask them. But I'm going to try to spell it out the best way that I know how to explain it and the way that makes the most sense to me whenever I try to explain it to other people. First things first, this game is a D20 game. So, you know, you've seen a D20 die.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
The 20-sided die or whatever?
Yeah, a 20-sided die. So that's like the main die. There's multiple that you use. You use a D20, a D12, a D10, a D8, a D6, and a D4. And sometimes you'll use a D100, which is basically like you can get just a normal like big D100. It looks crazy. It's like a giant circle with like tiny little notches everywhere.
That's cool.
But a simpler way to do a D100 is like they make D100s that are essentially 2 D10 shapes, and then one has like one half and the other has the other half, and then one is the first number.
I wonder if you could just roll
could
you just roll like a D20 5 times and add it up?
No, because that's not how it works.
Okay.
It's not like an addition thing. It's like you have to roll a specific number because sometimes you want to roll low. So sometimes you want to roll like a 1, which would be a 0 on one die and then a 1 on the other die. If I'm correct. I rarely roll D100s. And if I do, normally I do them digitally. So I was going to say, I'm just explaining this now to kind of, as some people use physical dice. I have a feeling that when you play, you're probably going to use digital dice just to make it easier. Because you'll be able to just like click on your character sheet and it'll automatically roll the thing for you. So, that'll help with some of this. Some of this that I am explaining will probably be a lot easier when you actually play, just because the way we do character sheets now are a lot of done for you stuff. So sometimes it's just like you just click to attack and then it automatically rolls the right amount of die for you and gives you the final number, does all the math for you and stuff, which is kind of nice. I am going to also send you a random like level 5 character that I have built or something. And so that way, as we're going through some of this, you can like look at what a character sheet
just
looks
like as a reference. Yeah.
Dice, very easy, very straightforward. Generally speaking, you're going to roll a D20 to do most things. Most of the other die are used as either modifications or like damage a lot of times. Or if you're rolling on like a table, there's some classes have like a table that you roll on for like a randomized table thing, which is pretty cool. But most of the time you're rolling a D20 and then you're adding stuff to it.
Okay.
Pretty easy. So generally the order that you do stuff in is you'll roll your die, you'll add whatever associated modifier that might be doing. So like if I'm asking you to roll an intelligence check, you would roll a D20 and then you would add your intelligence modifier if you have anything to that. And then after that you would apply any like circumstantial bonuses or penalties. So maybe you're a ranger and the reason I'm asking you to roll an intelligence check is because you're searching for something. Well, if you're a ranger and you are hunting, you may have a bonus to that intelligence check to hunt. Or if you're in darkness, right, and it's hard to see, I would say I would give you a penalty to roll to that So you would
Yeah,
add
the darkness is the one I am actually weirdly familiar with. It's like you can cast darkness on like your whole party except you, for some crazy example. So
yeah, kind of, yeah. But yeah, if you're in like underground or something and it's hard to see, I could say it's really hard to see. You don't have dark vision, so you're gonna do this, with a penalty. Now that main penalty, generally speaking, is advantage or disadvantage, right? So advantage, here's a very easy way to think about it. If you either have advantage or disadvantage, you roll 2d20, and then you take the higher number if you have advantage, and you take the lower number if you have disadvantage. So if let's say you rolled 2, you roll a 17 and a 5. If you have advantage, you would take the 17. If you had disadvantage, you would take the 5.
Okay.
And if you don't have anything, you just roll once and take whatever you get.
I got you.
So, like, back to my intelligence check situation. Let's say you're a human and you don't have dark vision. So, like, you can't see well in the dark. Like, it's kind of hard to see. And you're trying to track something or look for a trap or something. And I would say, all right, you give me some sort of check, but you're going to give it to me at disadvantage, which means you would roll the 2 die, take the lower number, and then do all of your like math adding to that.
And then you do your actual turn.
And and then that would determine if you succeed or fail.
Okay, so basically you have to do all of those things first, and then you do your actual turn.
So this isn't really like turns in combat or anything. This is like just open world stuff. So this is like you're walking through a thing, a dungeon, and you're just trying to make sure that there's no trap, right? Yeah. That's kind of the situation I'm talking about. And so then you would compare the total number to a targeted number, whether in a situation of like an ability check or a saving throw. There's a DC, which is like a difficulty class. So like the higher the number, the higher the difficulty. And then for an attack roll, there's something called AC, which is armor class. And that is how hard it is to hit that person. And every thing has like an armor class. So like if you're fighting a goblin and you go to swing your sword, in order to hit that goblin, you will have to roll a d20 and then add your respective modifiers to be above his armor class in order to hit.
Okay.
Him, if that makes sense. So, any questions so far?
No, I'm just taking notes on what you're saying. Yeah. I have a notepad, by the way, and I'm just like, you hear me go?
Yeah. So I'm just making sure that like it all makes sense. So it's generally,
and I feel like it'll make more sense when I'm like in the middle of it doing it.
Sure. We'll go through, and we'll actually go through a sequence. Here in a minute, like when we get further down the line, we'll go through a sequence where I'll like give you some examples of like scenarios. But generally speaking, there's like kind of 2 different types of scenarios. There's like combat scenarios, and then there's non-combat scenarios. So kind of between those 2, you're going to make specific choices. But I can ask you to roll, as the DM can ask you to roll for whatever. And that helps me make decisions, helps me see if like if you ask me to do something, I would say we'll roll a check for that. And then that would see if it if what you want to do happens or not, or succeeds or fails. And then how we do that kind of depends. And then just as a random thing, this is something that a lot of people forget about, but if you are in a half, because there are some mechanics that have the amount of damage or have the amount of stuff, you always round down. So if you're dividing if you're having and the 7 is the number, you would round down to 3.
Okay,
if that makes sense.
Gotcha. So anytime there's like a half anything, it just goes.
It just goes to the lower number. The lower number, yeah. All right. So every kind of thing with your character is based around ability scores. There's strength. And I kind of like to think of these into I like to think of this into 2 different categories. You have your hard skills and your soft skills, right? So you're on the hard skills side, there's strength, which has to do with like moving things, pushing things, lifting things. Sometimes, like if you're trying to cross a stream and the stream's really strong, you might have to make a strength check to like not fall or something, like hold your balance. There's dexterity, and dexterity can affect things like your armor class. It can affect like how nimble you are in, like, let's say you're jumping off of a building and I might have you make a dexterity check to see if you roll well and like don't take damage or take less damage or something. And then there's constitution, which has to do with kind of how much damage you can take, how resilient you are. It has to do with it directly affects your health, and in some classes it will also affect your AC depending on like things. But in general, it just kind of affects your health.
Just like I almost said survivability, but
yes, that's a really good example. Yeah, the survivability. It also affects if you're a spellcaster. It affects. There's a thing we'll get a little bit later on, but there's a thing called concentration, and it affects whether you maintain concentration when you get attacked and like take damage and stuff. So it's like your survivability, basically. That's a really good way to think about it. And strength and dexterity both also affect damage rolls. So like how well you can swing a specific type of weapon. Or dexterity specifically affects how well you can like shoot a bow and like throw daggers and stuff.
So that's like more like the common RPG trope.
Exactly. Yeah, those are all. I mean, every RPG current is basically based off of D&D.
Yeah.
So
that makes
sense. You can kind of think about you could think about it in terms of like Elden Ring-ish stuff.
Yeah,
it will make a lot of sense for you there. Especially the spellcasting side of things too, which is the soft skills mainly speaking. So you have wisdom, you have intelligence, and you have charisma. You have wisdom is mainly like how like naturally smart you are. I want to say like not book smart, but like, you know, reading people, doing like reading, like having insightful knowledge on like, I can tell they're lying or not.
Mental tact,
yes.
Like because it's not just like book smarts. It's like just natural brains.
Yes. And then for book smarts, you have intelligence. Intelligence is like your history knowledge, your religion knowledge, your knowledge of
so that's like your book learning.
Yes, exactly.
There we go.
Your book learning.
Yeah.
And then charisma is obviously how well you can talk with people, how well you convince people, persuasion, things like that. And for some classes, charisma is their spell casting. For some classes, they use intelligence. For some classes, they use wisdom.
Wow.
So, and it depends on like what class you use. So, good for instance is clerics use wisdom. Famously, wizards who use their books are intelligence, which makes sense.
Yeah.
And then sorcerers are charisma. So like the naturally gifted sorcerer, they didn't work for any of their any of their abilities. It's just been like they were born with their abilities, so they use their natural charisma as their spell casting modifier. So it's like that charisma modifier for a sorcerer will affect like how well they cast spells, how hard it is for them to be missed by an attack, things like that.
Okay, so like any of the soft skills could be used for casting depending on your...
Yeah,
that's kind of cool.
But the soft skills can also be used for other things like reading people. So like if I'm in a situation and I'm trying to say, is this guy lying? I can say, make an insight check. And insight is directly correlated to your wisdom modifier. And so you would roll and then add your insight modifier to that roll. And then we would see if it succeeded or not. And if you succeed, I would be like, yeah, he's lying. You can read him like a book. And if you didn't, I'd be like, you think he's telling the truth. So yeah, it kind of like that. You know what I'm saying? It's very
so you'll have certain abilities that are linked to both hard and soft skills.
Exactly. So now we'll dive into the character sheet now.
Okay.
So I can show you, because now we're kind of getting into stuff that's like it's hard for me to just explain, and I'll just show you now that you kind of have like a mental understanding of it.
Yeah.
All right. So this is what a character sheet looks like on D&D Beyond. D&D Beyond is what we're going to be using to build your character. This is what we're going to be using to use your character. So let's start at the top, right? The top section you can see is you can see your strength modifier, your dexterity modifier, your constitution modifier, your intelligence, your wisdom, and your charisma. So they're kind of split into hard on skills on the left, soft skills on the right.
Yeah.
Which is really nice, easy way to see that. I'm gonna close up. All right. Yeah. Strength, dex, con, intelligence, wisdom, charisma. You can ignore all this other stuff. I'll explain it all in a minute.
Yeah.
All right. So now if you look here, these are our skill charts. Right in the middle there. So you see acrobatics, animal handling, arcana, athletics, deception, history, insight, intimidation, investigation, medicine, nature, perception, performance, persuasion, religion, sleight of hand, stealth, and survival.
I see a lot of negatives on there.
Yeah, it's because I rolled kind of bad. Actually, no, those are a lot of pluses. These are pluses.
Okay, this
the
is
only
tiny
one
on
that
my screen.
The only one that's a negative is I don't think any of these are negative actually, which is nice.
Wow, okay, they look like negatives on mine.
Yeah, none of those are negatives. All of these are plus everything.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. So
I was like, damn, this character sucks dick. I was like, Jesus, what happened to me?
It's not great. And you're not going to use these. We're going to roll for your own stats and stuff whenever we get to character
so this is
building.
This is just to see it.
Yeah, this is just a base character that I rolled up real quick. It's just a rogue, a half-elf rogue that I rolled up real quick. So, and then you can also see over here, you have your saving throws, which are directly correlated to each of the things. You have a saving throw for each of these things. A lot of these will be a spell will ask you to make a saving throw in order to take damage or not. So if you roll and you exceed the spell DC, which like is the spell difficulty class that I was talking about earlier, like that number that's set on like how hard it is to beat it.
Yeah.
If you beat it, you'll either take less damage or sometimes no damage. And if you're under that spell DC, then you take full damage.
Wow.
So, and as you can see, you get other things. There's something called proficiency. We'll talk about that now, because now that you kind of see all the skills, you can kind of see the mod, like the one next to it is the thing that relates to it. You can see all these black dots. that are next to it.
Uh-huh.
And like you have one over here next to your intelligence saving throw and one over here next to your dexterity saving throw. This character is proficient in those skills.
Yeah.
So what that means is that you would take a good, for instance, is deception here. Okay. So our charisma modifier is a +2. Therefore, our base deception is a +2. But we're proficient in deception. So we would add our proficiency bonus, which is this number right here next to charisma. We would add that also to our deception.
Now, do any of those hard and soft skills level up later, or do they?
They do. As you level up every 4 levels.
Okay.
Every 4 levels, you have the opportunity to add one to 2 skills or add 2 to 1 skill. Now that can get a little confusing, and I'll explain a little. As you can see, like we have evens and odd numbers here.
Yeah.
Your plus number goes up every 2 big numbers.
Okay.
So when I say adding 1 to each, if we have a 14 and we add 1 to that, it's going to go to a 15, but it's still going to be a +2 until we get to a 16. And then a 16 is going to make it a +3.
I see.
So it's a little complicated, and you kind of don't need to know that as much for just playing like one game.
Yeah.
But if you're playing
is that for like returning campaigns?
Yeah,
and
so
stuff?
that's for more like an overall long campaign.
So essentially is New Game Plus is what you're telling me.
Kind of like for you, it's not going to matter because we're only playing one game, and you're probably going to be the same level the whole time.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't really worry too much about it. But if you're like, oh, I want to be in a campaign, over the course of a long amount of time, you would make, specific decisions based on that. And so when you add, let's say you add a plus, you go from a +1 to a +2 in your constitution, right?
Yeah. That
affects your constitution saving throw. That affects your hit point maximum, or maybe we go from a +2 in wisdom to a +3 in wisdom. Yeah. That's going to affect your wisdom saving throw and then any skill that has wisdom in it as well. So animal handling, insight, medicine, perception, survival are all going to go up by 1 as well.
It's like they have certain point thresholds they have to get to before you get those.
You get the next
bonuses,
plus.
Essentially.
Exactly. You get the next bonus at that point threshold. The cool thing about the proficiency bonus is the proficiency bonus goes up as well at certain levels.
Yeah.
With your overall level. So like everybody's just goes up together.
Yeah, so whatever you're proficient in, it just adds to that. So it just kind of like reinforces what you're supposed to be doing for the role of the character.
Exactly. All right. Okay. So now one last thing about the proficiency thing. Because I'm a rogue, obviously you want to be sneaky. And so I put a +3 in dexterity. And as you can see in stealth down here, I have a +7. All right. And you see there's the black dot, but then you also have a little ring.
Yeah.
That means I'm an expert. I have expertise in stealth.
Oh.
So that means I add the proficiency bonus twice to my stealth. So I take the +3 for my dexterity, and then instead of adding +2, I add +4. So I double the proficiency, then add that to my dexterity, and that's what my stealth is.
Oh, okay.
So once again, a lot of this is it might be a little unnecessary for you. Because a lot of this math and a lot of this addition and a lot of this stuff is going to kind of get handled for you. I just want to make sure you understand why the numbers are what they are.
Yeah.
From a general perspective. And this can be stuff that you'll just kind of understand more as you play as well. So now let's hop over and look at the actions and all of this stuff to the right.
Okay.
Over here. So this is where you have your general actions. There's a bunch of stuff that you can do. It's really cool. This is where you do things like attack, and I'll go through attacking and stuff. And it gives you things to do like unarmed strike, like if you just want to punch somebody with your fist, you can do that. Rogues have a special ability called sneak attack, and it's when they have advantage on or are catching somebody in surprise, they can add an extra damage die to that attack, to that damage. Yeah, and that just kind of explains it there. And then this all these tabs over here just like give you more stuff. So like there's inventory, here's a bunch of stuff that this character just has. Features and traits. Things like, you have racial traits, which are I built a half elf.
Yeah.
And so you automatically get dark vision, and this is kind of what it means. Fey ancestry, you have advantage on saving throws against being charmed, and magic can't put you to sleep.
Oh, that's cool. So certain races will have certain buffs as well.
Exactly, and you can
then
see
probably
that
weaknesses as well.
Throws. Sometimes, but most of the time they try not to do the weaknesses thing anymore. They kind of worked that out of a lot of classes and races. Skill versatility, it gives you stuff. And then rogue features, these are like class features. So here's all the proficiencies I started with, the expertise I started with.
Yeah.
This explains sneak attack. And then you get something called Thieves' Cant, which is like a special language that you can speak, and it helps you to like hide messages and talk to other rogues and other like assassins and stuff together.
How would you cast that? Do you like?
That's a thing that you would do. What you would do is say, I'm going to talk to this person, but I'm going to say it in Thieves' Cant. And in Thieves' Cant, I would say,
oh,
but or like you would say, I walk up to him. So if you're a rogue and you see somebody else, and you walk up to him and you say, hey, how are you doing today? And you would say, but in Thieves' Cant, I say. Because it's a language within a language kind of deal.
So basically, nothing is secret to anyone. It's just the outcomes are determined by the DM based on the rolls.
Yes.
Okay, so everything's out in the open. It's not like a board game to where it's like one person knows something, but everybody else doesn't. Or it's
some people. Yes and no. There are some like character secrets.
Yeah, I'm sure they're like, but I just don't. A lot
of them are story related though.
Okay, I guess without like playing, I don't understand it, but like I don't know how you would keep something secret from everybody if it's also related to the story, or you have to like progress the game.
So you would just say, yeah, you just don't know that. Like you other person at the table that heard him say that, you just don't know that. Your character doesn't know that.
Oh, so it's like we as the people know, but the characters don't know.
Exactly. You have to create a differentiating line between you, the person, and you, the character.
Okay, cool. So again, it's not like a board game to where, like, if you're playing a board game or something, and you have to not say anything to the group. Okay, that makes sense. So everyone is aware. It's just how your characters are affected, not you.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, that's okay. Now I got past that.
Does that make a lot more sense too?
It does now, because when you're talking about like Thieves' Cant or whatever, it's like, okay, well, it'd be really hard to cast that and then nobody else know, right?
Yeah.
So
exactly.
You have to make it aware, but it doesn't matter what the people. I think that makes it kind of more interesting that everyone is aware, so they have to figure out how to work the characters around that, because it's the character's world.
But and here's the tricky part. So now we're getting into like, this is a very constant at the table, metagaming. You can't. So let's say you go have a conversation with another rogue with your party around you, and in Thieves' Cant you say, I'm gonna kill this guy, right? The other players at the table now know that you said that. They aren't allowed to act upon that information as though they knew it, though. And they can't do things that would set themselves up to know that. Now,
okay, yeah.
Now, sometimes if it's something that big, sometimes what I would do is just have you text me whatever you're gonna say. Like if it's something you don't like, you think is gonna make everybody else like change how they would play.
If it needs to be private, it can be private.
It can be private.
Or
yes.
if you benefit from the privacy, you can because as long as you let the DM know, then that
yes,
the game can, okay.
The DM knows all.
Yeah.
The DM should have general control and be able to help you make whatever you want to make happen.
Okay.
So he is both servant and storyteller at the same time.
Okay. All right. That
Yeah.
makes sense.
So it's very fun. And think about this, the amount of flexibility you have as the player, because anything is at your disposal now.
Yeah.
Like literally anything. You aren't constrained by the game. If you want to do something that is like mechanically possible, then you can do it.
So like if I'm a strength character and we're in a bar and I'm like, I want to throw a chair at that guy, I could if I had enough strength to do it.
You could. There would be repercussion. The barkeep would probably call the knights on you and you probably die or get arrested at least.
Right, but it is possible.
Yeah, or get in a bar fight.
Don't
yeah.
give me ideas.
Yeah. It's possible, but you'd probably get in a bar fight.
If it's strategic that a bar fight happens so that we can distract somebody to take something away.
Exactly. So now you're thinking.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you could be like, oh, I'm going to pretend like I'm drunk and I'm going to throw this bar stool at this guy. I'm going to get angry and throw this bar stool at this guy. What I would do in that situation. So now we're kind of getting just into player situations.
Yeah.
If that's a thing that you're like, oh, I'm going to distract everybody so my thief can go pickpocket this other guy and get the key that we need to get into this building that we're trying to infiltrate.
Yeah.
So you go, I'm going to act drunk. I'm going to throw this table. I'm going to bump into this guy. Maybe not even like throw the chair, but I'm going to bump into this dude and like kind of start trying to, make a fight.
Yeah, just cause a scene.
Cause a scene, make a fight out of this whole thing. What I would do is I would make you roll a performance check.
Okay.
So I would say, all right, roll a d20. I would say, how many beers have you had at this point? And I would take that into account on whether I gave you advantage on that or not.
Okay, so if I'm 3 beers in, I'm feeling good, I get advantage.
Exactly.
Because I have awareness. But if I'm like 6 or 7 Bud Lights in,
if
I'm
you're
like,
6 or 7, if you're 6 or 7 in, I'd probably give you advantage anyway. But if you've only had 1, I probably would say it's a straight roll.
So yeah, it works the opposite because I'm not believable as
exactly.
being drunk. Oh, okay.
Exactly. You
Okay,
have
that's
to.
for sure.
You're trying to convince somebody that you're drunk, and you're trying to fight them. And if the more drunk you are, the more actually believable that you would be in that scenario.
You might even be a little stronger.
Exactly. You might roll like super well.
Oh man.
Hence the advantage.
Yeah. No inhibitions.
Exactly. So now you're starting to get kind of where I'm at, and then I would say, all right, he jumps on you, he grapples you, and you start fighting, and then I would say, okay, Rogue, you're gonna try to pickpocket this guy. All right, cool. Roll me a stealth check. And so then we would play that out, and I'd say, all right, you sneak up on this guy, and so I'm providing a lot of the like visual commentary, of the things that are happening.
And like you're not biased. You're literally just like saying what happens.
Mm-hmm. I am
on the skill checks.
I am the narrator of the story that is unfolding, and you guys are making the decisions. I think the best way I've ever heard this described is I am presenting a situation, and you guys as the characters are making decisions, and then all of the roles that all the roles are for are seeing how well or how not well those decisions go.
Okay, that makes sense.
And so it can be anything. You could do whatever for the most part. And like there are certain characters that give you buffs to do certain things, and like out of combat stuff. Like not everything is combat related. A lot of bard stuff is like not combat related. There's even in rogues, if you look under the tools proficiency on the bottom left there, You can see Carpenter's Tools, a dice set, and Thieves' Tools. Thieves' Tools is what you would use to pick locks. So if you're like, oh, I want to pick a lock, I was like, okay, cool. You as the rogue have Thieves' Tools, so we're going to make a dexterity check and add your proficiency.
Yeah.
So you would roll a d20, add your dexterity, and then add proficiency to that.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, so... And then that would I would be like, the DC is 12. And then if you roll and add all that stuff and it's above a 12, then you pick the lock successfully. And then if you don't, you break one of your Thieves' Tools and you have
the DC.
less.
So you said DC is basically just like the difficulty of whatever. Because if a lock is like, okay, it's DC 6 is a pretty easy lock to pick.
Exactly.
But if it's like DC 30, it's like, oh.
It's actually impossible. So the numbers kind of do matter in those kind of scenarios. Generally, 1 to 5 is like super easy. You should be able to do it in your sleep. 5 to 10 is a little bit harder. 10 to 15 is like pretty dang hard. 15 to 20 is like expert level, like freaking hard. 20 to 25 is near impossible. 25 to 30 is like, you would need to be like level 18 to 20 to probably hit some of those numbers. And then above 30 is actually impossible, I believe, unless you're like god tier and something stupid. Like there are ways to roll above a 30 for sure.
I'm sure it can happen, but it's like very, very rare.
You would have to roll a 19 or a 20 as like a level 20 rogue with your expertise and your stealth being like a plus 18.
Wow.
So
that's big numbers.
Yeah. So you would have to hit like stupid high numbers. It's very unlikely, basically.
So the number is it's just based on the die, right?
Exactly. It's based on like how difficult do I want this to be.
Okay.
So, if you roll, now we can get into like extremes of this. So there are 2 things that you would roll. There are you've probably heard Nat 1 and Nat 20.
I think so.
So in a lot of games, and this is how I generally run mine, are you roll a d20, and you're fishing for a number. You're gonna see what the number is. If you roll a 1, you auto fail that check. Like there's even if your modifiers take you above that
just
number,
the 1 is 1 and done.
1 and done, exactly. And then Nat 20 means you automatically succeed.
Oh, okay. So it's kind of like freebies or like super punishments, but they're rare.
Exactly. Okay. But there are other things. So like Nat 1 in combat just means you automatically miss. You don't like hit it with stats. But in Nat 20, when you crit on an attack, you double the dice that you roll for damage.
Wow.
So you do theoretically double the amount of damage.
I like that.
Yeah. So like there are in combat perks for a natural 20. And there's literally a fighter class based around fishing for crits. Mm-hmm. So it's called the champion fighter, and you can crit on a 19 or a 20, and at higher levels you can crit on an 18, 19 or 20. So during combat, you automatically crit as an 18 whenever you're making an attack. Acts as a natural 20.
Okay.
So regardless of what their DC is or their AC or their armor class is, you automatically hit.
Sweet.
Yeah. It's like act of God thing.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty easy way of like mega succeed or mega fail, and then kind of 2 to 19 is just normal.
Yep.
Any questions on any of that stuff? Before we get into moment. Like combat and like damage and stuff.
Yeah, not at the moment. It probably when it comes into play, but it'll all be in my brain.
Yeah.
So.
All right, so we're gonna move back over to the actions area, and we're just gonna talk about a basic combat scenario because we kind of talked about a social scenario with like the being in the bar thing and all that. So a basic combat scenario would be you are this rogue. You are fighting a goblin, we'll say.
Yeah.
You don't know what that goblin's armor class is. So you don't know what you need to hit.
Mm-hmm.
You are going to... You're trying to attack with your dagger, let's say. Okay? Now, you have to be within 5 feet of that enemy in order to do a melee attack. And where it says range right here is if you throw it, you have 20 foot distance normally. So if you're 20 feet away, you can throw your dagger and you would just roll a d20 like normal. And if you're within 60 feet, you would roll at disadvantage.
Oh, okay.
So you can still hit, you would just roll at disadvantage. Seems pretty straightforward. But if you're within 5 feet, you can roll like normal. See how this rapier below the dagger says 5 foot reach?
Yeah.
That means you can't throw the rapier. You can only attack like normally with it.
So there are certain times, like there are ranged weapons, and then like I guess there'd be ranged spells and stuff like that too.
Exactly. There are spells that you can do at range. There's spells you have to do within 5 feet.
Okay. So there's like that makes sense.
I'll pull up a more complicated character later to kind of show you the spell aspect. I'll pull up my actual character from my campaign I'm in right now.
Okay.
And I'll show you something because we're I think at level 10 or 11 and we're a lot higher level, so you can see how a little bit more complicated it gets.
Yeah.
But so you see the hit DC, right?
Uh-huh.
That is how much you add to your D20 roll to see if you hit. And then if you hit, this is how much damage it does.
Mm-hmm.
So a very simple scenario would be, all right, I'm going to attack this goblin that's in front of me. Dope. Roll to hit. I would say roll to hit. You would roll your D20. Let's say you rolled a 5. And then you added your 5 and you would say 10 to hit. And I would more than likely say you miss. But let's say you rolled a 10 and so you add your 5 and now you're at a 15. So on the die there's a 10 and you'd add the 5, the hit DC, the extra little bit from the weapon itself, your proficiency with the weapon generally speaking, and that would be 15. And I would say, all right, cool, you hit. Then to know how much damage you did, you would do this 1d4 plus 3 piercing damage.
Does the DM decide whether or not you hit or miss, or is it like
there are whenever you build? So this is where it becomes like a lot of work on my end, but I have ACs for every character in the game.
Okay.
So they're kind of like predetermined depending on what level they are. So like a good for instance, I'll show so if we look at this giant eagle, I'll show it on camera right here. It says giant eagle and it says armor class 13.
I see. Gotcha. So if that ace, or if you roll the 10, you're gonna miss because it doesn't meet that threshold. But if I get a 15, then I will hit, and then I gotta determine how much damage I do based on what I rolled.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Yes. So, and every like monster or enemy that you fight would have, an AC and an armor class, and that can depend on like if they're like a mage or like a sorcerer or something, they might have like a magical armor, or like if they're just like a warrior or something, they would have a, like a plate armor or a half plate or something on that would, bump up their defense.
Yeah.
And make them harder to hit essentially. So tracking with that.
Yeah.
And then as you can, and then I feel like that's pretty straightforward. And then as you can see, different weapons have different damage. A short bow is a D6, a rapier is a D8, and then a dagger is a D4. And these are all just for rogues. You would use different weapons with different people. And then you have your special abilities, like sneak attack for the rogue. So let's say on this same, scenario that we're fighting this goblin, you're going to sneak up on them and then attack them from behind. I would say, okay, cool. You have advantage on that attack. You would roll your 2d20. And let's keep with those same numbers, right? You roll a 5 and a 10 on each d20.
Yeah.
You would take the 10 because you have advantage. And then you would add the 5. And I would be like, okay, awesome. 15 hits. Then you would do your 1d4 plus 3. But then because you're a rogue, you have that special sneak attack ability.
Yeah.
You would add an extra d6 to your damage. So this is kind of where like character building and class choice and all that kind of stuff.
That's where it all matters because you have to think about everything. You got to think about like the weapons you're using, the skills you have, and all.
Exactly.
And then you have to make sure that you roll past the AC, which is the armor class, and then
exactly. And so let's say, for instance, you have thought about playing a barbarian, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for a barbarian, you would do something called rage. It's a bonus action, and we'll get into action economy here in a second.
Yeah.
But where there's a bonus action, so you would activate that rage with a bonus action, and then that rage gives you a bunch of like ability things. It's just like a class ability, and so you would, anytime you would hit and do damage, you would do rage damage on top of it. So you would do your weapon damage plus 2 on top of that as rage damage. So every single class and subclass has like different ways of maneuvering through battle and combat and attack rolls and damage and adding extra damage or giving you the ability to do multiple attacks per turn or things like that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about action economy real quick. This is kind of important, and honestly, I probably should have talked about it first. But so we have this actions tab, and it says all, but I'm going to go through each of these individually. We have actions, and then this is everything you can do with an action. You have a bonus action. You have a reaction. And then other is like other things that you can do in combat or out of combat. And then you have your movement, which is your walking speed up here.
Okay.
So this is more of a combat thing, but in combat, you get one of each of those. So you get one action, one bonus action, one reaction, and your total movement speed per turn.
Yeah, okay.
And so when you use your turn, ideally you're trying to like use all of those things as much as possible.
Yeah, you're just trying to maximize what you have.
You're trying to maximize your turn, and then when you get back to your turn again, those replenish every turn.
And you do all of them in your turn.
You can, if you can. Not everybody can, but yeah, you can.
Okay. So do you have what determines the use of those? Like, what would limit, or a better question would be, what would limit me from using all of them?
Having things to do.
Okay, so sometimes you just won't. Like, you're not going to be in combat all the time, so you won't have an attack.
Yeah. So an attack is also a part of the action. So the main action, if you say, I'm going to take the attack action, awesome. If you're a rogue, that means you get one attack. That means you get to swing your weapon once, right?
Yeah.
Dope. Very cool. Awesome. But if you're a barbarian and you're level 5, right? Mm-hmm. You get 2 attacks per action. So you're going to say, I'm going to take the attack action, and then you roll 2 attacks.
Okay.
And do 2 of those sequences, basically. But then this is kind of where it gets a little complicated, and it can really depend on your class and your subclass. Like the rogues can also, as a bonus action, use 2 weapon fighting and make a dagger attack. That's why rogues tend to use daggers a lot. They use the dagger attack on their bonus action. So 2 weapon fighting is like I hold 2 daggers. I do 1 attack with my main action, and then I do a bonus action attack with 2 weapon fighting with a secondary dagger. So,
or is it any secondary weapon, or just like
it's only
dagger rapier?
That's where it's really only. I think it's simple light weapons. I think is what you can do that with. So there's like, see where it says in the notes over here, like there's like specific qualifiers next to each like weapon and stuff. Those kind of make it determine what things can happen where.
Are there like, is it kind of like Elden Ring where you have like regular real world weapons and like you have like a long sword, you've got like a staff, but then you've got like these really creative like, you know, special weapons? Or is it just...
Yes, there are magical weapons. They have like special capabilities and things. So this is a really good time. And so we're talking about action economy. I'm going to hop over to one of my other characters that I use.
Okay.
His name is Sean. He is my character that I use for my D&D game that I play every Thursday. If you want to watch, you can.
So he's still
Homebrew.
alive and kicking.
Yep, he's still alive and kicking. This is the one that we stream every other Thursday. So it's his name's Ashawn. He's a sorcerer warlock multi-class. We can get into multi-classing later, but you can, depending on you can multi-class certain classes in between certain classes depending on what your stats are. Don't need to worry about that for your thing. That's just a cool thing that you can do. So we'll take a look at my action economy real quick. All right. So in my attacks, I have all of these things that I can do. I also have spells, a crap ton of them.
Yeah. That is a lot of spells.
And then as you can see over here, like next to stuff, it says 1A.
Sorry, Siri was being stupid.
Good Lord, Siri, shut up. It says 1A, which means 1 action. So it takes an action to cast that spell. But then if we go down here, Hellish Rebuke is 1R, 1 reaction, or Hex is 1 bonus action. So different things can cost different action and action economy stuff, and weapons can be the same as well. Yeah. And then the Staff of Embers is a weapon that I have that's a magical weapon. So if I click on that, it opens it up. And the Staff of Embers is a staff that catches on fire and allows me to, with charges, cast spells through it and give me access to those spells. It also gives me resistance to fire damage when I'm holding it. And it kind of goes through all of the stuff on like I regain 1d4 plus 1 expenses daily at dawn. I can attack with it and they'll take 1d8 fire damage, stuff like that.
I like that. I like having the idea that it's like I can have like a hammer, or I can have like a magma hammer.
Yeah, so here's actually a really cool thing. I'll show you another character in this same campaign with me. His name is Riane O'Kellig. Find him. So this is I'll have to swap over.
Where do the names come from? Are they just like pulled out of a hat, or
we make them?
I want I'm gonna name my character like
You can name whatever you want.
Gummy
man.
Bear.
Yeah, if you want to. So
this is my barbarian. His name's Gummy Bear.
So
he will crush your bones.
So Riane is a Goliath barbarian.
Ooh.
And he has the Gorgon war pick. So
sick.
So he has a +10 to hit. With
now
that.
You're speaking my language.
So he has a +10 to hit. So you would roll your d20 and then add 10 to whatever that is to hit. The Gorgon war pick does 1d8 +6.
Wow.
But he also has 2 attacks per action, so he can swing that thing twice. And then it also, adds other things. It adds an extra d6 piercing damage from the attack. So they would take a d8 +6 plus another d6. So they would take 1d8 and 1d6 +6.
I'm guessing all these like damage types, like I'm sure there's like elemental weaknesses because in like Elden Ring, like pierce damage is like some of the best damage in the game, and like there are certain enemies that are weak to pierce damage, and
less so in this. Some armors give you resistance to piercing damage or slashing damage.
Okay, so it's not necessarily like a weakness. It's just you could protect yourself against specific types.
Sure, and like some monsters will have resistance to those types of damages as well, so they'll be less effective. But then like there are some, like an ice elemental, if you use fire against it, they're gonna take more damage. They're gonna double the damage on that. So yeah, it's very, very similar in that way, but a little less like strategic. But you can see his armor class is 17.
Okay.
We'll talk about initiative in a second, and we're at level 11 in our campaign, so the proficiency bonus that we're adding is +4 to a lot of stuff, which is really cool. His strength is a +4, so you can see he's like pretty solid in some things, but less so in others. He really stacked in the hard skills area and less so in the soft skills area. So
yeah.
Which is good and bad, because if like my character casts a spell, let me find one. Dissonant Whispers, right? Dissonant Whispers, you have to roll I don't roll an attack to do that. The opponent has to roll a saving throw in order to not take damage. So my spell save DC is 17, so they would have to roll a wisdom saving throw. So Riane, if I was hitting him with Dissonant Whispers, would have to roll a d20, and then his wisdom saving throw is -1. And so he would have to roll a d20 and subtract 1, and that number would have to be above 17 in order for him not to take full damage.
Yeah.
And full effect, because like a lot of spells are, some damage, but a lot of them are about the effect that they have on you as well.
Yeah, so it's like more strategy than just pure damage. Like damage is always great, but if it puts you in a better position, then like
or like it could cause a condition, like you to lose some of your speed.
I said earlier, it's like casting darkness. Like that could give you an advantage to everyone, but like if you're an elf that can cast darkness and you're the only one that can see because you got dark vision, it's like you're doing something right. If it matters to what's happening. I mean, if you just do it randomly, then like there's no point. But if it's like say you're in like a combat scenario where you're outnumbered and you're like, all right, I'm gonna cast darkness, but I'm gonna lead everybody out.
Yeah. So
that could happen.
Yeah, and I feel like that's a lot before we get into character creation, but that's honestly most of it.
Yeah.
Like, there's not much else for me to explain before we get into character creation. So, yeah, do you have any more questions, or is there any kind of scenarios that you want to throw at me to like ask how they would play out?
So far, none really come to mind. I'm getting the general idea of it. Like, the main thing for me is like, knowing when something is successful or not with like the DC and everything like that.
Yeah, so a lot of the times you aren't gonna know those.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the times that's just a knowledge thing on how the mechanic works. But a lot of the times, like in a real world scenario, give me a scenario of something that you can just think of off the top of your head that might cause
like a fantasy scenario or just like a real world.
Anything.
Let's say I'm drinking coffee and I spill it on myself.
Okay, so you spill your coffee. I would make you roll a dexterity saving throw to see if you are quick enough to move out of the way and not spill it on yourself.
Sweet. Okay. And then if I failed that.
And then if you failed that, you would spill it on yourself and you would take 1 fire damage from burning.
Yeah.
So there's a really good example of that.
That's cool.
But if you rolled and you saved, you would just miss you and you wouldn't take anything, and you wouldn't be dirty.
Yeah, that's cool.
So there's like a real world example of like how I would.
Yeah, so pretty much anything can be, any sort of scenario can be put into the context of D&D logic and rules.
Exactly. That's why D&D is awesome, and people are constantly thinking about it.
Yeah. So what do I need to do homework wise after?
So I'm going to send you some stuff because I want to send you some classes I think you would like to play. And I want you to just watch some videos on some classes. I'm also going to send you a video that kind of going over the things I just went over.
Yeah.
Just so you have like another version of it. And for those that are watching and listening, I'm going to link these in the description as well because it's good for everybody. Mine's more of like a primer on a general knowledge base of it.
Yeah.
It is, but there are people that have made much more highly produced YouTube videos about these things that go into much deeper detail and deeper explanation than I can right now.
Yeah, this is like the first day of class when you get in, and then the teacher just like starts rolling stuff out, and you're just like, oh, this is it.
But I feel like you get the general gist of it. You seem to have like a general understanding. Really, it's you choose to do a thing. I say, okay, roll this, and I tell you what to roll. You roll a d20. It succeeds or fails, and then if it succeeds, a thing happens. If it fails, a different thing happens. That's kind of the general basis of it.
And having like a general understanding of RPGs is helpful.
Yeah. So basically, if you combine Skyrim and Elden Ring building mechanics as far as character creation goes, it's going to be like you're going to be in the same ballpark. It's going to be a little different just because you're going to have to think. Some things that happen automatically in a lot of those games, you're going to have to actually like remember and think about because they won't happen automatically if you don't know that they exist.
Yeah, it's a lot more cognitive. Yeah.
But at the same time, you aren't going to be playing a super high level. I think my plan is for you guys to play like a level 3 or 4 character. So it's going to be pretty like baseline.
Pretty chill.
Stuff. Yeah.
I feel like it will get more complicated once you get like 3 or 4 campaigns in and your character's like level 15 or something.
Yeah.
You know, and you're just like... Phew.
15 and levels in D&D only go 1 through 20.
Okay, yeah.
So like that for a scale, like a level 3 is like not necessarily beginner because that would be like level 1, but it's
like the first mission after the tutorial.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's kind of how I like to think about it is first mission after the tutorial. You're going to be killing something big.
Yeah. Okay.
But you're not going to be like ending a god or anything like that, which people do at level 20.
That's awesome. Yeah. Oh my god, if a campaign got that far in there.
Bro, there's straight up, I have a book. What's the book called? It's the Rise of Tiamat. And Tiamat is like a legendary dragon in D&D lore. It's a she, and she is a dragon god with like 7 heads, and they all shoot different elemental damage, and she is like one of the hardest things to kill, and she has resistance to everything. And she
Tiamat is one of the main bosses in Final Fantasy 1.
Yeah. So Tiamat comes from
probably just based off.
Yeah,
of that.
it comes from D&D lore.
Yeah.
I think it actually might come from something else, but it is a big deal.
But I am familiar with the name Tiamat.
I think it's Mesopotamian mythology or something like that.
That's cool.
Technically,
that's really sick.
But it is most well known, I would say,
from like D&D.
From like D&D and stuff. I was right. Mesopotamian. Tiamat in ancient Mesopotamian mythology, the primordial goddess who is the personification of the salt in the sea and the mother of the gods. She was also associated with the chaos of creation. So like, she created the world, basically.
I feel like it's kind of like Bahamut or Ifrit is they're more so associated with like Final Fantasy than they are their actual like.
Yeah,
so the Tiamat is more rooted
lore.
in D&D than anything. So
yeah, I always think of her as the D&D thing rather than like other things. Even though I know she's Mesopotamian mythology, I just like I hear Tiamat, I think multi-headed dragon that's really freaking hard to kill from D&D.
Pretty much King Ghidorah from Godzilla, but
basically
Queen Ghidorah.
But she's got like a 25 AC or something crazy like that.
Oh.
Think about what I just said. Based on what the knowledge that you know, a 25 AC is freaking hard to hit, dude.
Yeah, you gotta be ready for that, and lucky too. It sounds
and lucky, and like super. There's an element of luck to it all. But at super high levels, also some monsters get things like legendary resistances, where if you make them roll like a spell save DC on a spell, and they fail, they can just succeed. They can just do that 3 times in a turn.
That's insane.
Yeah, it's nuts.
That's awesome. I'd love to eventually get so good at it to where I get to like a level 20 game.
It's super fun. So I want to give a shout out to some like podcasts that I and like shows that I watch a lot. Obviously a lot of people know Critical Role. They're super popular.
Yeah.
They do some really cool stuff. Them at high levels gets a little bit wacky. My favorite is Not Another D&D Podcast, which is an audio only show. And so it's all theater of the mind, which is where we're going to be doing a lot of. We're going to be doing a lot of theater of the mind. We're going to be, which is like, there are no minis. There's no game board. It's all just like in our heads.
Wow. Yeah.
So, and I think it's more fun for people to like listen to. And since this is a podcast thing, I didn't want to have like a ton of visuals. I wanted it to be more, more mentally stimulating.
Mm-hmm.
So
more verbal and like just
more descriptive,
cerebral, I guess.
Yeah, more descriptive. So, and theater of the mind tends to be more descriptive, but a lot of people like Critical Role plays with like physical game mats, and like they have minis they move around, and like Dimension 20 also is another big one who I also love a lot. Uses like either a virtual tabletop, a VTT, and so they make virtual versions of all this stuff that you can move around, or they use physical ones sometimes too. And so we're going to be playing Theater of the Mind, which is going to be really fun. It'll be actually the first time I've ran a Theater of the Mind game, which I'm very excited about doing.
You know what? It took me like 5 times for you to say that, because I thought Theater of the Mind was just like a metaphor for doing everything in your head.
I mean, it is, but yeah.
But Theater of the Mind is the actual campaign that we're running.
No. Theater of the Mind is just what it like thinking. Like there's no physical representation.
Oh,
of anything.
Okay. Well, I'm even stupider than I thought. No. My theater is all crusty and full of cobwebs, and nobody's been there in years.
But yeah, you're just gonna have to like think about things and remember where stuff is, and I'm gonna give you like kind of what's around you and stuff. So.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like, again, once I put everything into practice and do it a couple times, it'll be like, Oh, okay. It'll make sense.
So in the next, to kind of set up the next one, in the next one, we're going to be building your character, which, you know, at time of recording, that'll be next week for you.
Right.
For viewers, it will also be next week that they're watching this. So the next time we get here, we're going to be working on building your character. We're going to land on what you want to be. We're going to roll your stats, all that kind of stuff. It's going to be super fun. We're going to talk about, like, we're going to show plugging them in and how, like, plugging in certain stats in certain places can shift how things go. I'm going to help you optimize it a little bit. So if you have I want to make sure you have a really good playing experience the first time. So I'm going to try to help you optimize your character as much as, you know, a low level character can be optimized.
Right.
And we'll go through after we built your character, and we'll go through and I'll talk about all the stuff that you can do with it. And then I will bring a character, and then, or I'll pull a monster from the monster manual or something, and then I'll have you fight it.
Very
and then
cool.
we'll just do like a test fight on that day, and we'll just do that over this video call. It doesn't really matter. It's fine.
Yeah. We could. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
So I think that'll be super fun. Yeah, I think that's it for this one. So
Sweet.
We'll come back next week and build a character, dude. Build your first D&D character.
That's cool. I mean, D&D's been around me my entire life in a way. So, like, now I'm actually doing it.
Yep.
It's pretty sick.
Yeah, dude. Very excited.